Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is Marta's Sci-Fi Seminar, and this is the second video on the novel drafting process. So at this point, fingers crossed, you have all reached about 5,000 words. And that's fantastic. You've got words on paper, you've got an outline of some scenes to come, at least, if not more. You have done some brainstorming about how you want things to roll out in the long term. Yay! So congratulations to all of you that have made it this far. There's more to go, but you can get there. Now you know you can get there. You've got a couple chapters knocked out and you are underway, hopefully sticking close to your original arc, but also flexible enough to add some things or move some things around if it seems good. My biggest hope is that you are writing freely, that you are not stopping to edit at this point. I am a firm believer in separating the writing and editing processes completely. It's good to look over what you've done the previous day or the previous week if you're having to jam writing time into smaller bits, but don't edit it at this point. Look at it, have a sense of what it's about, but be ready to just roll forward and go into the next day's work. Editing comes later. Right now, you're just trying to get the story down as roughly as you need to, or as refined a manner as you're able. But really, that's all kind of immaterial. This is a draft. In cooking, this is the equivalent of adding like the water and the flour and the salt in order to begin to put the bread together. This is the equivalent of making the dough, not even baking or slicing the bread. So keep going. I hope that you're beginning to develop some good routines and that you're able to keep up with those routines as you move forward from here. Couple of things for you to think about. Because this is the Sci-Fi channel, I'm assuming you all are working in science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, paranormal fiction. You know, that the genre in the last 30 years has really kind of spread out all over the place, and it's wonderful, it's fun. I've talked a little bit about some of the little subgenres in there. So even as you're writing and you're thinking, you've been doing some reading in your genre or subgenre, you've been thinking about how to meet those, what we might call obligations of the genre, I want to give you another perspective as well. Every writer who works in a given genre is also contributing to the formation of that genre. So every space opera writer is slightly changing, widening, exploring the definition of space opera as they write their space opera. And that includes you. You have the opportunity to, while meeting most of the criteria for the genre or subgenre that you find yourself in, to go ahead and make some changes if those feel right to you also. To give you an example, you know, science fiction typically in its early era featured guys in rockets going to planets with hostile aliens, war, war, war. But at some point, oh, you know what? It became guys in planets, guys in rockets going to planets and encountering aliens that were not hostile. Sometimes it became aliens coming to Earth who were hostile. Sometime later it became aliens coming to Earth who were not hostile. Some point much later, it became people of various genders in rockets going to planets where the aliens of various genders inhabited those planets. And on as things evolve and change, as different writers got to have their say and bring their little bit of flavor, flair, inflection, flourish, for those of you who are WandaVision fans, to the enterprise of writing science fiction. So think about that a little bit. You know, it doesn't have to be a big deal at this point. But as you're drafting and you come to these crossroad points where you need to decide what's best for your story or what's most typical of the genre, please feel emboldened. You have my permission. You have the permission of all the lawbreakers before you, the genre lawbreakers before you, to do what's best for your story, not necessarily what's most typical of the genre. It's how science fiction has become what it is today, the incredible playground of different viewpoints and unimaginable options than it had even 10 years ago. So please enjoy my recommendation. And if you've watched the channel before, you know I am working to particularly recommend writers of color and writers from the LGBTQIA+ community. I have a terrific lesbian science fiction writer to recommend today. For those of you who have not yet read Becky Chambers, go now, find books. Chambers has a couple of books out now, at least a novella. I want to say maybe another separate project that's outside her primary series. But really mainly, Chambers has made her claim in the genre with the incredible Wayfarers series. I'm a big fan. I actually looked up a couple of interviews with Chambers this week, knowing I was going to do this, and was thrilled to know that actually the first book of the Wayfarers series, Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, was originally a self-published project. Chambers put it out in 2012 on her own, and then she kickstarted it. And then it gathered attention, it gathered some great reviews, and by 2015, and I think I found it in 2015 or 2016, it was in print with a major house. And then the sequels have followed, Closed and Common Orbit. My favorite, Record of a Spaceborne Few, is book 3, and now just about a month ago, maybe a little longer, The Galaxy and the Ground Within is the 4th, and I think this is intended to be final book of the Wayfarers series. I know that Chambers has under contract with Tor a duology that is solar punk rather than space opera, where this is very classic space opera stuff. And in talking about some of the subgenres, I know I'm also kind of tossing around some terms that maybe could use a little more definition. I suppose I could probably start lots of different fights in lots of different sci-fi bars by being too narrow in my definition of space opera. So I will say, I'll try to go wide here and say space opera is science fiction that might use some of the techniques of hard science fiction, which sticks very close to science and extrapolation of what could happen next based on what we know now about science. Space opera might use some of those things as the premises for a series, but then it launches off into these big epic storylines, and we get a whole mythology of the cosmos. Space opera usually involves interplanetary travel by ships or by some means of teleportation. Star Trek and Star Wars are both space operas. So when I say Chambers is working in space opera, the space opera examples I gave you about guys in rockets, that's space opera. Solar punk is one of the several new sci-fi punks. It began in the 1980s with cyberpunk, which was science fiction that took its computer science very seriously and started to think about what was really happening in the web, in virtual space. That was the beginnings of cyberpunk in the 80s. And then very quickly in the 90s, cyberpunk was overtaken and almost entirely flattened by steampunk, which is also very cool stuff. Steampunk casts into the past, typically the Victorian era, and says, what if we had developed technology X or tool Y at this earlier point in history, and these things had happened instead? So steampunk allows for historic settings with futuristic tech. It can be a lot of fun. There's all of these baby punks now that are little sci-fi subgenres that are tremendous fun. There's diesel punk, there's NASA punk or punch card punk, which is about early NASA history. Diesel punk, I believe, diesel punk is the one I'm probably going to get wrong because it's one of the ones I know least, is not Mad Max post-apocalyptic precisely, but it's a sci-fi genre that deals a lot with cars and motors and a kind of rough and scruffy aesthetic. Lunar punk is moon colonization stuff. Solar punk, however, is not sun colonization stuff, and I will wind us up here by saying that the Becky Chambers solar punk duology is one of many kind of solar punk pieces to come out in recent years. There are some books and multiple anthologies that have come out that are self-consciously solar punk. There are also some other works that have been sort of retroactively claimed as solar punk. Solar punk is as sunny as it sounds. It tends to be a more utopian or at least optimistic post-apocalyptic kind of science fiction. So solar punk, and I'm reading a big solar punk anthology right now that I'll tell you about in another video, really tries to put the focus back on technology can help us solve our problems. It just has to be a little more strategically applied than maybe we have necessarily done up to this point. So anyhow, for next time, another 5,000 words, check on Becky Chambers novels. They really are fun. And I will just give you the quick gist of the Wayfarers series. The spaceship involved is the Wayfarer. And the first book is all about a team that works on the crew of the Wayfarer and the work they do to punch small holes in space to make tunnels so that other ships can travel smoothly. But as they are a tunneling ship, their work is dangerous, and they get involved in a pretty ambitious project in the first book. And of course, things do not go as planned, but the crew is fantastic fun. The second book, we actually step back from the Wayfarer crew proper, Closed in Common Orbit. We get kind of the backstory of one of the minor characters from the first book, not a member of the crew of the Wayfarer, but certainly a friend of the Wayfarer crew. We get Pepper's story in book 2. Book 3, which, as I said, is my favorite, is the story of life in the fleet, Record of a Spaceborne Few. Much as we get a lot of the story of the Wayfarer itself in book 1, in book 3, we get the story of the fleet, which is most of the human race and how we came to leave Earth and what became of us after we did, how we came to be part of the Galactic Commons. Which is just, yeah, Becky Chambers is really, really wonderful. So go read her, keep working on your book, see about looking up one of the baby punk books in terms of anthologies or novels. And I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.